Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Shevis, Perek Gimel, Halacha Zayin, and making a siyum on the third chapter, and God willing, starting today, Perek Daled, Halacha Aleph, and we are dedicating this class, L'Schus, our own Chassan and Kala, Avremel Shachat and Tanya Goldschmidt, may they build a binyan adiyad, etc., etc., big mazel tov. Okay, so we are starting now in Daf Chaf Hey Amid Aleph, the fifth line from the top of the Amid, beginning with the new Mishnah, the final Mishnah, Halacha Zayin. The final Mishnah is going to speak more about clearing stones that people need for construction on the Shevis year. And as we have been learning until now, that there are two steps to it. If the intent of the clearing of the stones is to prepare the land for planting, that type of clearing is asur midrabanan. If the person's intent is to clear the stones, as an example, because you need the stones for construction, even though there's no isur midrabanan, but you have an issue with marasayin. And we learn different ways that you have to resolve the marasayin. I just want to add something very important, that marasayin only exists when a person is removing stones from his own field. From his own field. But when a person is removing stones from someone else's field, then you have no issues of marasayin at all, because I would not clear your field for you to be able to plant. Evidently, I'm clearing the stones from your field for me to be able to take the stones. Now, we're going to have in our Mishnah two other exceptions where even when I am removing stones from my field, I don't have to adhere to the rules above. Like as an example, all of the stones that were laying loosely on top of my field, that those are stones that, for example, I cannot take them all the way down until the ground. I have to leave the bottom layer. On that, the only exception would be if I am building the stairs or if I'm building the dam. So the stones that are within my arm's reach, those are the stones that I could take until the ground, otherwise I may not. We're going to have in this final Mishnah two more exceptions, as we will see. Both the law of Avnei Kasef and, as we'll see, the rule of a Kabbalan, with the two interpretations that we will learn when we learn the Gemara inside. Now we're going to have a Gevaldike Machlekes Tanoim between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Akiva, and this is going to touch upon a topic also connected to Bava Kama, to a Boyer B'Reshus Harabim, and that is, am I allowed to even only temporarily put something down in the public domain that might cause other people to get hurt, even though my intent is a good one and I plan to clear it out right away? Rabbi Yeshua is the Tana that says I may, and this will facilitate the laws of Shevis, and Rabbi Akiva will hold that a person may never make a boyer b'reshus harabim, and we're going to see the great chiddush and the stringency of the Tana Rabbi Akiva. Now, the Gemara will discuss a topic that we have in Moed Katan concerning Chol HaMoed, and we'll apply the same over here. And always Chol HaMoed is more stringent than Shevis, is that the question is whether a person is allowed to repair an existing wall. As we'll have this topic for Chol HaMoed, we'll have the same topic also concerning here in Shevis. That will be more or less the sugya all the way until the end of the third chapter. And in the fourth chapter, the Mishnah will open up by applying all of the rules that we learned in Perek Shlishi. We're going to apply it from stones to other items in the field, like twigs, like grasses. Same concept, that if the person is clearing it out in order to prepare the land for planting, that will be asur midrabanan. If the person's intent, for example, is clearing these items for firewood or for animal fodder, even though midrabanan there is no isur, nevertheless, the halacha will be that there is a marasayin problem. And here again, within certain limitations, when it becomes clear that the intention is not to prepare the land for planting, in these cases, as we learned in the Perek Shlishi, we'll have also in Perek Revi'i, that we will be allowed to clear those items from the field on the Shevis. What will be introduced in the fourth chapter is that at some point in the times of Chazal, people began to abuse, that will be the words that we're going to use, they're going to abuse the system, And even though their kavanah was to clear the land, they did it all within the parameters where they can claim they were doing it for other purposes. And because of that, the Chachamim became even more restrictive in what may and may not be done, both concerning the new topic of twigs and of grasses, as well as concerning all of the sugyas that we learned in Perek Shlishi concerning stones. Now, without any further ado, Chavre, we're going to Daf Chaf Hei, and Daf Chaf Hei Amud Aleph, starting by the Mishnah, by Mishnah Zayin, the final Mishnah of this Perek. Just give me a second over here. Let's get the machines working, hopefully better. Okay, so says the Mishnah, here we go again, that when you are removing stones from your own field, other than the few exceptions that you have to leave the bottom layer, and however, if you're building the stairs, that was the last Mishnah, and or you're building the dam in a way that you are allowed to build it without the cement, only to make a chatzitza, then you can move it all the way down until the ground. Otherwise, you have to leave some of the stones. Here comes an exception that avnei kosef, shoulder stones, and the Mishnah itself will define the size of this type of stone. In other words, it's a shoulder size stone that is obviously being used for building. Person is not taking it to clear the field. Mikol makoim, that's a stone that you are allowed to remove without any restrictions, all the way down until the ground. Number two, exception number two, hakublan. Now, what's the kublan? Interestingly, the marafulda is goyres kablan. So the marafulda, 3 lines from the top of the amid, says that we're speaking about a kablan, an aris. V'hakablan shekibul sadala arisus. And as we just spoke out, that clearing stones that have to, in a way where you have a problem of maras ayin, is only if you are clearing it from your field. So other people, the observers, might think you're preparing the field for planting. But when a person is a kablan, that means that they don't own the field, even though that they share a percent of the profits, they are not the owners. It's them clearing stones out from another person's field. And b'chlal, there's no issue of maras ayin when I am clearing someone else's field out with stones. That is the way the marafulda learns. The other way of learning the hakublan, and that's the way we will learn our Mishnah, that a kablan means a contractor, a builder. Everyone knows this person makes a parnasa from building. So that's the kablan over here. So says the Mishnah that hakablan mivian mikol makim. Mikol makim means even from his own field. Even from his own field, he will be allowed to remove it. Again, there's no issue of maras ayin. Everyone knows that this person is a builder. And that means, as an example, that he can take the small stones all the way down until the ground. Now, how do you define shoulder stones? So it says the Mishnah, ve'elohein avnei kosef, kol she'einu yochaylu linotel ba'achas yad, any type of stone that is large to the point where you cannot lift it by using only one hand. You need to use both of your hands. And such stones were regularly placed on one's shoulder to transport them from one place to the other. Again, these are stones that there is no maras ayin issue. Again, if your kavanah is to remove these stones because you want to prepare the land for planting, that's always going to be asan midrabanan. We are continuing with the topic that your intent is you want to take it out for another reason. You're taking it out for building. Problem is, maras ayin, the maras ayin is addressed simply by the size of the stone. And by the way, that's al derech. That's similar to what we had above, that when you have a wall, if you have in the wall 10 tvachim tall, and in the wall you have 10 stones, and those 10 stones or more, but 10 stones need to be taken by 2 people. Same thing over here. But this stone is smaller. It's not that you need to have 2 people to schlep it, but you cannot pick it up with one of your hands. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yosef defines the avnei kosef. Avnei kosef kishman, meaning in other words, even if the stone could be lifted with one hand, but these are types of stones that people regularly will dafke carry on their shoulder because they're not little. And why on their shoulder? Because they don't want to carry one stone at a time. They want to carry 2 together. They want to carry 3 together. And that's the way of transportation. Rabbi Yossi is more lenient than Rav Meir. Because there are such stones are allowed to be taken from your field when your kavanah is for building without any restrictions. That is topic number 1. Now the Mishnah continues with topic number 2, which is the laws of building a wall during Shevis. Now what's the issue with building a wall? As we will see in a moment, that when you dig the ground to put in the foundational stones, you might say you are hoeing, right? You might say that your mom is doing avodas karka. So says the Mishnah, and every nuance is important. When you're building a wall and it's dafke, if it's in between your property and the public domain, we will be more lenient because you don't want people entering your field. Now, by the way, on Shevis, your produce is not yours. When it's time to harvest the produce, you may not close off your field. True, but if it's not at the time of the harvest, I have the right as a landowner to prevent people from the Rosh Hashanah to freely enter my field. They're going to trample all over the ground and they're going to downgrade the soil. For that, I'm allowed to build a barrier. So there's a damage being done to my property, and that's key, the fact that there is a damage being done to my property. So says the Mishnah, that if you're building a gader beinoy bein Rosh Hashanah, muter lahamik adasela, you are even allowed to dig down all the way down to the bedrock, and no one will misunderstand what you're doing with you're hoeing, you're working the ground. No, it's clear. They see you're building a wall. So in other words, there's no marasayin issue. So that is rule number 1. Now gavaldik. Now we have another issue, which is that when you're digging into the ground, you are removing earth. What do you do with that earth? Ma yaseh ba'afar. Here we have a problem. Normally you would put it on the side of the hole. You're creating the agapayim, as we just learned a few daf ago. Or you're going to spread it out on the field. That's not something you can do on Shevis, because here you are preparing that earth is fit for planting. That is the issue. All right. So what do we do? Says the Mishnah, Rabbi Yeshua holds that you should pile it up dafka in the Rosh Hashanah. Now, putting something b'Rosh Hashanah is in itself problematic because you are creating a hindrance in the public domain. That's called a bar b'Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, you will have to, right after you place it there, you're going to have to remove it. And when you remove it, amazing, we're going to read the Mara Fulda, you are allowed to bring it back into your home. Look inside the Mara Fulda, around 14 lines from the top of the Amid. First of all, you put it in the public domain. So you can't put it in your domain, you put it in the public domain. But then you can't leave it there. So after you put it there, so everyone who's observing you clearly sees that you're not preparing the banks of this hole for planting. You're not spreading out the earth to have soft earth on your field for planting. You took it out of your property. But now you can't leave it in the public domain. And now you bring it back into your property. And like this, you resolve the issue of marasayin. That's amazing. Divrei Rabbi Yeshua. However, Rabbi Kiva Omer, absolutely not. Rabbi Kiva Omer kederech she'ein mekalkelim b'reshus harabim, kach lo yisaken. So he says 2 things. Number 1, this solution is a non-acceptable solution. Why? Because even though your intent is to leave it there only temporarily, you're not allowed to put, even temporarily, a hindrance, a boir b'Rosh Hashanah. And more than that, what happens if there is already spread out in the Rosh Hashanah, let's say piles of earth, and you want to clear it out? One would think that you would be allowed to first gather all of the piles into one pile in the side of the Rosh Hashanah. So instead of you having 10 little issues, you're making one large issue which is more discernible to the eye. And then from there take it into a private domain. Even that may not be done. In other words, whenever you are addressing a boir b'Rosh Hashanah, you have to right away resolve it. Even if it's already there, that's the next line. Kach lo yisaken, that's what the Mara Fulda explains. If you have offer, I'm reading inside the Mara Fulda. Kach lo yisaken, around 16 lines from the top. Koloimer tarvayu asiri lekalkel. Not only the way you, Rabbi Yeshua says, the Hainu Litzbar Sham Ethroi, you're not allowed to put there even temporarily the earth that you removed from your field. Why Shem Mekalkal Lekach Reshus Harabim? Afal Pi Shem Mesaknei Achar Kach, even though your kavan is right away to take it back into your private domain, but if you put it there for a moment, Mekalkal Lehu L'Shah. We're so careful regarding a bird b'reshus harabim, says Rabbi Akiva. V'gam afilu l'saken asur kigoynim hoyo afarei avanim ufuzanim b'reshus harabim. If you already have earth or stones spread out in the reshus harabim, lo yitzbereim l'makim echad mitzidei reshus harabim. You would think first clear it out to one corner in the reshus harabim, and you can argue you're doing something good. No, you're not. Even that may not be done. Elo yisalkein miyad mikol reshus harabim, and take it out liyam or take it out l'nor. Or if you want to bring it into your private domain, you can do that as well, if it's ownerless. But we're very careful when it comes to even allowing a temporary potential damaging item. Don't forget, a boyd, I know we're using the boyd means a pit, but it doesn't mean, as we learned in Bava Kama, a boyd is any type of obstacle that could create damage in Reshus Harabim. Now we have a problem according to Rabbi Akiva. So yeah, you could build a wall between you and the public domain. But now, Mayaseba Afar. So he says a Gavaldik solution. We learned basically in this Pedic 2 topics. One is about fertilizing, and one is about stones. So let's go back to the first topic. And what did we learn over there? That if you make in every base saw 2,500 square amas, if you make 3 piles, by the Zevel, we spoke about the 10 mashpelos in each pile, and that makes it evident that you're not doing it lizabel, your property. The same thing with the earth. Earth is good to have in your field, take a soft earth that you dug up, if you're putting down a very thin layer. Once you make very large piles of earth, it's clear that you're only storing it there because you removed it from digging, in our case, digging the foundation for a wall. So you are only allowed to pile it in your field. 3 heaps in a besa. And that addresses the Marasayan. This is Gavaldik. And now, finally concludes the Mishnah, V'chein ha'choifer boir, or shiach, or ma'ara. Whoever is digging any type of pit in the Reshus Harabim, and this is not speaking about Shevis, we're speaking about in general. So even when you have permission to dig these types of, let's say, water reservoirs or other storage areas, you have a problem of what to do with the earth. What to do with the earth. So here also we have a machlekes Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yeshua will hold, you can put it on the side. Just, dig the hole the way you normally dig it. Put the earth on the side of the hole and make a big pile with the intent not of leaving it there, but after you finish making the hole, then you remove it to a place where it won't damage anyone. You remove it out of the Reshus Harabim. Says Rabbi Akiva, you can't do it even for a moment. So you have to, you take a shovel and you have to right away take it out of the Reshus Harabim, and you have to come back and take your next shovel full, etc. Okay, says the Gemara. The Gemara is referring back to the first part of the Mishnah. Avnei kosev bois mikol makai. What's the pshat mikol makai? Afilu mitoich shaloi. And as we mentioned today, that all of the restrictions of Marasayin is only when you are clearing out your field. If I am clearing out someone else's field, I can take all the stones and pebbles all the way down until the ground. So that's the pshat in our Mishnah, that where don't you have to take it? Where don't you have that limitation? Where are you allowed to take all of the stones, even the ones laying on the ground, from your field? That's Avnei Kosev. And when the Mishnah adds the second exception, the Kublan, let's go not with the Oris, let's go with the contractor. Maybe mikol makim means that even if the stones are smaller than Avnei Kosev, and you're taking it out of your field, you're taking down little pebbles. Here again, since you are a contractor, you are allowed to take it. So the restrictions we learned above is for a non-contractor. And now the Gemara is referring back to the Mishnah. So you're building a wall, and you're allowed to do it. The chiddush of the Mishnah is that no one will suspect you of hoeing or plowing because it's evident that you are building a wall. So says the Gemara, that you are indeed allowed to do it. That's only if, like we mentioned, you are putting up a wall between your domain and the public domain, because if people will enter your field freely, not when they're harvesting your fruits, but stam, they're going to ruin your soil. So there's a damage. so you're allowed to do it. Financial loss. But if a person had a wall, or if they didn't have a wall, and they want to erect a wall between their property and a neighbor's property, asur b'shvius, that will be prohibited. Why will it be prohibited? Because when you dig a foundation, it appears there's a mata sign that you are hoeing. It appears that you might be plowing, and therefore you may not do it. Without the prevention of a loss, we're more restrictive. Furthermore, aval b'moyed and cholamoyed, afilu lebeinu shusarabim, it's going to be aser. And why is that? You're having a loss. You're having a loss. So if you remembered, we just spoke out that from the 5 hetenim that allow you to work on cholamoyed, you have the davar ha'aved, or you have a hefseid. Even when there is a hefseid, still you may not do that which Chazal coin as tircha yesera, which is excessive exertion. That may not be done. Gewaldig. Now, it's good to know that even that restriction on cholamoyed, because of tircha yesera, is only not to be allowed to build a wall between your field and the Reshus HaRabim. Because there is going to be a hefseid if people trample on your soil, but it's not a hefseid meruba. In contrast, if you have a home that's breached, or even your chatzir in the times of Chazal, that people's personal home activities spilled over into the yard, there, on cholamoyed, you can build a wall. Because there might be a significant loss if a ganav breaks into your property and they steal your stuff. But coming back over here we're speaking about a sadeh. And again, the point of the Gemara b'Shem Rabbi Yechanan is that the permissibility is only when there is a hefsid involved, beiner lebein reshus harabim, but between you and your fellow, you may not do it, and how chalamayit is even more strict. Now we're going to continue on Daf Chaf Hei Amid Beis. So says the Gemara, that I just want to give a hegdim that we have in Moed Katan. We have the Mishnah tells us that on the Shemitah year, if a wall that was existing prior was breached, on the Shemitah year, you can fix it in the usual manner. Okay. And here again, by the way, that whole Mishnah, like we just learned over here, when am I allowed to fix the wall? If it's between my property and the Reshus HaRabim, if it's between my property and my neighbor's property, here again, you may not do that. But says the Gemara, Bepirza, when the Mishnah in Moed Katan, when the Mishnah tells me that I am allowed to fix a breach in the wall between my property and the Reshus HaRabim on Shevis, that's only bepirza she'eina saga ha'afar. It's only a breach that's not closed off by the dirt. So the way they would have walls is that there would be stones, and normally people would put the stones facing the Reshus HaRabim, but behind the stones, on the all the way up, facing my property, facing my field, there would be afar. Today they would say you would put cement, you would put up something that would keep the stones strongly affixed in its place. So what type of breach will allow people to break into my property and to cause a damage? And because of that, even though that you can argue building on a field might look like hoeing, no, the Chazal said, we don't want you to lose any money, you can fix it. That's only if there was a breach through and through. How do you tie breach through and through, an exposed breach? She'enoi saga ha'ofer, that the earth under the stones, on the side, on the inner part of the property, is not standing. Aval, says the Gemara, that's the way we're going to read it. Aval bepirza shehi saga es ha'afar. But if the stones taka fell down, aber the earth, today you would say the cement, is still closing up the breach, so there's a stone missing. But a person walking in the Reshus HaRabim doesn't see it as the property is exposed. The property is not exposed. So here, indeed, asur legoydroi b'shvi is. No, as long as no one is able currently to trespass, so then there is a rabbinic issur of you building walls in your field, because part of that has to do with digging, and digging on Shevis in land is asur midrabanan. So says our Gemara. Now the Gemara is going to back this up from a brayso. And indeed, Vitana came, befedish, that kol pirza she saga ba'afar, if you have a breach, but this is on Shevis, but the breach is still closed up with earth, asur legoydroi b'shvis. It's only v'she'ein saga sa'afar, then mutar legoydroi b'shvis. Gavaldik. Says the Gemara that we just mentioned, and we backed up with the Braisa, that if the breach is closed up with cement or with earth, then you're not allowed to fix it. You have to add another layer. That's only if the breach won't be a michshol to the rabbim. And let me say like this, that once a wall begins to break down, even if the cement is standing and currently there is no breach, you have to look at the general structure. And if there's a possibility that a stone will fall without any warning, that in itself is a danger to the public. Even if currently there is no exposed breach, because we don't want for the public to get harmed. And it goes until the point that even if you have to demolish the wall, and then as we learned in our Mishnah, once you have no wall, on Shevis, you can build a wall. You can knock it down and you can rebuild it if it's going to prevent people from getting hurt. Now, going back to the Mishnah, we have the Maseches between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Akiva. Now we understand Rabbi Akiva's position in the case of our Mishnah. When you are digging a hole to build a new wall, and right away you're taking out a shovel full of earth, and Rabbi Yeshua says, well, put it in the Rishus Harabim. As long as people see you're not putting it in your field, you already addressed the Marasayin. Now you have a bird b'Rishus Harabim. Yeah, when you finish making the pile b'Rishus Harabim, bring it back to your field. Rabbi Akiva says you're not allowed to do that, because you can't even temporarily put a michshel b'Rishus Harabim. That's easy to understand. But then Rabbi Akiva added something. Even if you are beginning in the Rishus Harabim, as we read in the Maharafulda, you didn't even do anything. Currently you have 10 stones, 20 stones that you witness spread out in the public domain, and you want to clear it out because you don't want for a michshel to be in the Rishus Harabim. So what do you want to do? You want to put it in a corner and then take it into your house, take it into the yam. Even that may not be done. Now that's a problem. Why not? The michshel is there anyways. So Rabbi Akiva Omer, where do we have this source? Ad kedei kach, that you can't do anything, even if you did not initiate it, that will allow for even only a temporary michshol to be in the public domain. So Rabbi Akiva, the Gemara says, Ksiv, it says, V'sam derech, this is a pasuk in Tehillim, Kapitel Nun, V'sam derech means he who orders the way. Ordering the way doesn't only refer physically to making a path or making a road. It means someone who's cleaning the Rishus Harabim from potential boirais, from obstacles, that there's a bigger mitzvah to that. That for some derech, that the person who removes obstacles from the public domain, it says the Hashem, Ar'enu b'yesha Elokim, that person will be shown the salvation of God Almighty. And what's the kasha? The kasha is, you see the importance of clearing out a obstacle in the Rishus Harabim. Again, we're not speaking about the case of the Mishnah where you are putting it to take it back. That I get. But if it's already there and you are removing it, isn't that such a great activity that should allow you to remove it to the side and then from the side take it out completely? So the Gemara says, no, removing it to the side is not helping. Who said it's helping? Who said it's helping? You're taking a stone from one location, you're putting it into the other. Shani hiyachi, shu tikun, even though your intent is to be misakin, but v'soifoi, when you are moving it still in the Rishus Harabim, that act in itself could be the kilkul. Could be the kilkul. Look inside the Marafulda, 50 lines from the top and middle of the Amid, shu tikein lebnei Rishus Harabim, your intent is to be misakin. But v'soifoi lekilkul lahem, sheyaniach hagal b'makim echad. Because if you are making a pile in one location, in the Rishus Harabim, then v'kosher lahem yoiser. It might even be worse. Because when there's a stone, I can step over the stone. When you make a pile, I can't go over the pile. You're not helping me, you're making it worse. And that's why I'm not allowed to do it. Rabbi Akiva. Now coming back to the source or the value, the virtue of clearing obstacles out from the Rishus Harabim, the Gemara is going to link it now to the following statement of Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish, Shaul, this is Shaul HaMelech, Shaul ben Kish. Why did he merit to be a king? Because his Zaydah, what was his Zaydah's mitzvah? That he put lighting in the public streets. So when people go at night, that's the concept. Now he's not, the michshel is the darkness, that's there anyways. That was his mission. His mission was to light up the dark streets. And not only that, because of that activity, they called his Zayda with Neir. And where do we see that? So we go to Divrei Hayamim. Because of Echad Omer, right, Shaul ben Kish. What was Kish's father's name? So in Divrei Hayamim, you have a pasuk that calls his father Neir. The Neir hoiled as Kish. But however, we know because of Echad Omer, but we know that his Kish's father's name by the Bris was Aviel. Because of Kish ben Aviel. So was it Aviel or was it Neir? So why is he called Neir? Ella alidei shehoya zekenoi, or without zekenoi madlik neiros lerabim. Therefore nikra shemoi Neir. How beautiful is it? So therefore, Rabbi Akiva, who was so careful in not even temporarily having any type of obstacle in the Rishus Harabim, so yeah, you are allowed to build a wall. You're going to have a hefsed, good. What do you do with the earth? So he linked the heter with the heter for Zevel. With the first topic of the first topic of this Pedic, make piles in the manner that you are allowed to make piles of the 10 mashpelos into 3 piles in the Chol Beisa. Says the Gemara, Rab Oven Boyi. When we learned the sugya of Zevel, there were 2 things that were needed. Number 1 was the quantity. Right? When you make very big piles, it's evident you're not doing it to fertilize, you're doing it just to store, to be used in the 8th year. Gavaldik. But we learned, the first thing the Mishnah says is that you can't even do that during the time of the fertilizing of the fields. There you had to wait until Shapasko Oivdei Avoida. Now we want to know what happens concerning over here. What happens if on Shvis people are still working their fields, the goyim that are fertilizing, and therefore for the zevel you don't have any heter, even the 3 piles in the base of v'chulei. So the question will be, what do you do over here? Now this is not fertilizer, this is dirt. So are we bound by it or are we not bound by it? That's the Gemara's kasha, and the Gemara doesn't leave this question answered. And on that we can say, Chevre, that Hadron Allah me'ema saimotzi, and a big mazel tov for concluding the 3rd chapter. And let's jump right into Perek Revi. Now the beautiful thing is that Perek Revi is a hemshech to the same topic. In other words, all of the rule, I cannot clear my field from stones. If my intent is to clear the field, the same goes to wood and to grass. If my intention by stones is for building, if by grass and by woods my intent is firewood, or I want to put food together for my animals, then the ikeda din I'm allowed. There's no isur midrabanan. But vaited, you have a marasayin problem. And here again, there are certain things that you can do that will address the marasayin, as we had in the previous chapter. That's going to be the beginning part of the Mishnah. But then the Mishnah is going to tell us that there was a barishoina, and then people were not honest. People were using these rules that addresses the Maras Ayin to cover up their real intent, which is to clear the ground, to prepare the ground for planting. Chazal, because of that, became a lot more restrictive, and those restrictions went all together, both on the topic of the previous chapter of Avanim and the topic of this chapter, which will be Eitzim and Asavim. And let's jump right inside the Mishnah. So says the Mishnah, that's the Pshat Bari Shaina, that Bari Shaina, which is at the same time, whenever that was, until whenever that was, of when we learned all of the rules of the previous chapter by stones, the same was Hoya Oimrim, Melakate Adam Eitzim. Some people have the Girsa Avanim, some don't have the Girsa of Avanim. Avanim was discussed in the last chapter, but we're putting it all together. Because it's the same 2 rules. Aleph, to prepare the field, that you got a problem, Isur Darabanan. Not to prepare the field, Me'ikar Adin, there's no Isur, but you have a Marasayin problem. You got to address that. That's addressable, but you have to work within a certain restriction. As long as your intention is not to prepare the field for planting, you are allowed to do it. Right? You want to take wood for firewood. You want to take the grass, let's say, for animal fodder. The same way I can take it from my neighbor's field. And as we learned today clearly, that all of the problems of Maras Ayin is only if I am clearing it from my own field, because if I'm taking stones from your field, I'm not taking stones from your field to help you clear your field for planting. I'm doing it because I need the stones. So even from my own field, and the same thing, in other words, where it could be more problematic, but what will be my restrictions here, like we had by stones, the same we have by eitzim. And asavim, chevra daf chavav, as hagas. I'm only allowed to pick the large sticks. I'm only allowed to pick the large grasses. As long as I leave the smaller ones on the field, that itself makes it evident that my kavanah is not to clear the field. And that would be the simple way of circumventing Marasayin. And now comes the chiddush that we didn't learn in the past chapter, but this, it goes not only on the new topic, it goes on the whole Perek Shlishi, the part of the Avonim. And that is that Omi Sherabu Oivrei Aveira. People will gather, what they do? They gathered the large and the small. They gathered everything from their own field. And why did they do that? Because they wanted to have their field ready for planting in the 8th year. Even that is Asan Midrabanan. And then they claimed, I only took the big ones. People were not really keeping it, and they were claiming they were keeping it. So the Chazal made even more restrictions. Hiskino, no, they revised. Hiskino, they made an enactment that you cannot pick anything from your own field. I can pick it from your field. If I have to build, if I need firewood, pick it from your neighbor's field. Now don't forget that sometimes it's called choshesh and legoimlim. What's the chashash? I'm going to pick it off your field. You're going to pick it off my field. Both of our intentions is to prepare the field for planting. That's ad kedei kach we were not chayish. As long as I don't pay you and you don't pay me, says the Mishnah, so they said the only way I can get the sticks or the grasses or the stones off a field is sheyehei zeh melaket mitoich shaloi, v'zeh melaket, melaket mitoich shal zeh, v'zeh melaket mitoich shal zeh. Everyone is clearing it from the other person's fields, and by the way, if I am clearing it from your field, I can even clear the smaller items, right? As long as there is no pre-arranged agreement, and not only may there not be a pre-arranged agreement prior, that's already us. You're like my shliach, but even post, shaloi b'toiva. Shaloi b'toiva means if I cleared, I'm doing it for me, I need firewood. Chazal said I can't take the logs from my field. I'm taking it from your field. You're going to go ahead and you're grateful. Why are you grateful? Because you want to plant, you want to use your field on the 8th year. Everyone is allowed to do it. I actually facilitated, I prepared the land. If you even only tell me ayashikoyach, that already is prohibited. In other words, I am allowed to do it for you. Aleph, no pre-arrangement, and base, post facto, look inside the top Mara Fulda, that we don't want for the fellow whose field got cleared to have any type of gratitude expressed, even verbally. And still, there's a chiddush here, because the end of the day is, I'm doing it for you, you're doing it for me, but loy choshesh and legoimlim, that will be the way Chazal used the lashon. Now, if you can even tell me thank you, so ve'ein tzarach loimer, no need to say that you can't compensate me. Now, of course, money compensation won't be allowed, but maybe food compensation, of course not. That the ein tzarach loimer sheyiksois lahen mizoynos. If you can't say a thank you, so a kal v'chomer, basically that food compensation will not be allowed. All right, I just want to add one little thing, because we learned 2 days ago. So now that not Barishonim, but Misharabu Oivrei Aveira, I am allowed to clear out your field. That goes to wood. That goes to grass. Does it go to stone? It's not so simple. Those things have value. In addition to what we learned, that people needed in non-rocky terrain, people needed small pebbles in their field. So if they weed out weeds, they should have where to put it without putting it on the ground, then it's going to replant itself. So we're not speaking about in all scenarios I have as a carte blanche to go ahead and take stuff from your field. The point is that everything that we learned, including the beginning of this Perek before Umisharabu Oivrei Aveira, was all about giving heterim for me, at least in certain circumstances, to be allowed to remove stones from my field, and wood, and grasses. And at some point Chazal said that's the end of that. if anything, only from the other person's field, and still there's a certain leniency, because again, we're not being chayish of goimlim, but I cannot ask you prior, and I cannot express gratitude post, and we'll leave it here, and God willing to be continued.